there's some Kiwi patterns that use those, like the Mrs. Simpson and a few others.
Killer flies.
Yeah, yeah. It
Okay,
is.
we're recording now, thanks.
Okay. So
I think a very good investment, if you have the opportunity, is to buy an entire ringneck pheasant skin.
yeah,
Because
another
every
way to get it.
single feather on that skin will be useful. And it's usually cheaper than buying the components.
Right.
Ideally, you have a friend who shoots pheasants.
The other material that I use now, the traditional carry doesn't do this, but I use this to help spread the hackle on the carry at the front of the hook, and it's just standard old peacock herl. I think it catches a little air too, so it's kind of nice. And the last material is the stuff which is a fine wire. You can use multiple colors depending on what the body is. This one I'm going to use some red fine copper wire because it makes a nice contrast against the black body. And the last material for the body, I use embroidery yarn. You buy this from your local sewing store. They're cheap. It makes you can make a nice smooth body with it, and it's quite manageable. And again, I have a package full of varieties and colors. Useful for many patterns that need a body like that.
And the other neat thing about embroidery yarn is that you can separate the strands.
Yes.
And you can choose I think the standard is 4 strands. And
yeah,
fly size you can pick how many. Yeah.
Some of them are more easy to separate than others.
Well, it's twisted, so it's fun. Yeah, you walk through the house with the yarn trailing behind you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take an individual. The tail on this thing is a pheasant rump, and I'm going to take one fiber, and I'm going to attach my thread, which I've already done on the hook, and I'm going to run this back all the way down the shank, just to provide a base for what's coming up next with the body of the fly. I'm going to take it right back down to basically where the barb used to be. And I'm going to take this pheasant rump fiber. Oh, and interesting thing, when you take these things off the skin, you get this little fiber at the back called the after shaft fiber. And maybe one of these days I'll show you, there's a nice little pattern called the sparrow that uses that particular after shaft fiber as a head. And then I'm going to just strip off of this pheasant rump. I'm going to pull some of the fluff off the bottom, just so I can get at the better fibers. I'm going to take some strands off of one side. I'm going to turn it over and take some fibers off the other side. So I end up with a nice little clump. And the ends are reasonably close together. Then I'm going to measure a tail on this thing that is maybe half the shank length, maybe a little more than half the shaft length. It's not too long. I'm going to attach it at the back, a couple of loose wraps, snug it down. And I'm just going to open wrap over top of those fibers up the hook shank till I'm maybe 4 or 5 eye lengths behind the eye, just to leave a little bit of a body there. That's just underbody. Helps make the thread body a little smoother. I'm going to take some of this red wire, and I'm going to, my thread's already at the front. I'm going to start that wire right there where my thread was hanging, and I'm going to wrap it onto all the way down the hook shank, and I'm going to hold it on the far side of the hook so that it's going to end up on the far side and slightly towards the bottom when I get to back where I've wrapped the tail in. There's my wire out the back. And then my yarn. I'm going to try not to destroy this whole skein of yarn when I take the parts apart. I'm going to get a good chunk of black and I can bring my open wraps all the way up to the front again to where the wire was tied in, and I'm going to tie the yarn in there as well by the tip. And this point at the front is basically about 3 eye widths behind the eye. I'm going to wrap over that all the way back to where everything else is tied in at the rear of the hook. And again, the reason for doing this is to make sure that when I wrap my body forward, it's going to be a nice even body. Open spiral my thread up front again, right behind the eye. Use my half hitch tool and half hitch that off. Once again, this is where a rotary vise is handy. Now, this is a 4-strand. So when I start wrapping this, I want to get it started right at the back. And you'll see that if I make a slightly counterclockwise twist on the thread with each wrap, you'll see how it tends to separate the fibers here. And that makes it flat. And when I wrap this forward flat, you can see I can control, and every so often I'll make another counterclockwise twist in the embroidery thread. And that keeps the 4 fibers a little bit separated. And by determining how much overlap I make with that flat thread, I can kind of control the thickness of the body as I go forward. I just take my time and I can make it smooth, or in this case, I'm going to make it just a little fatter as I get up the hook shank. Now I'm, again, about that 3 eye widths past behind the eye of the hook. And I'm going to tie this thread off on top, embroidery thread on top. And trim it clean. Tie it down. Now I can probably get by without using the rotary here. I'm going to counter wrap opposite direction over the body in an open spiral, this red wire. And you can see it makes a very nice contrast. And I'm going to try and get them relatively evenly spaced. Then when I get up to the front again, I'm going to overwrap 3 times with the thread, pull the wire back and wrap in front. And trim the wire out. I never seem to be able to do the whirligig wire to break it off. It doesn't seem to do it for me for some reason. Now here's where I'm going to start doing the folded hackle. And that's the other reason for doing this particular fly is you're going to learn how to do a folded hackle. So here's my pheasant rump, and the way I prepare it is I strip all the fuzzy stuff off of both sides all the way down. You've got to be careful doing the second side because sometimes it'll break the stem. There we go. Oh, it did. Rats. That's not what I wanted. Oh, well, we'll make do. I'm going to hold that hackle by the tip, and I'm going to stroke these guys back. And I don't want too many fibers. So you see I've got about a shank's length worth of fibers standing out at right angles to the hook, the shaft of the feather. And then I'm going to lay this thing down where my thread is about an eye width behind the eye of the hook, right where that little V is there. And I'm going to lay it on the hook shank, just slightly on my side of the hook. So that when I make a wrap over top, it's going to rotate that shaft of the feather right smack on top of the hook. And you'll see now the bulk of the fibers are facing forward and these little bits are facing back. And I'm going to wrap those over to make sure it's down there really solid. I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to lift it up that tag end and again wrap behind it. And then I'm going to trim it off. And that locks that feather in so it's not going to be pulled out when I try to wrap the folded hackle. Okay. Now I'm going to get my pheasant tail, or my peacock curl, I'm sorry, my peacock curl. I'm a little distracted this morning. I just got some unfortunate news about my brother-in-law who fell and broke his hip this week, and he's now just moved to ICU with problems breathing, so I'm a little distracted.
Dave, just a quick question. I noticed that the feather that you've tied in already, the underside of it is facing up. Is that intentional?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Because that feather is curved like this,
Yeah.
so when I do the folding part, the folds are going to go to the back. It makes it curve this way.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you.
Now I've got just a little bit of this peacock curl sticking out from my fingers, so I'm going to wrap that on top and bring my thread up just to where I've tied that hackle in. And then I'm going to wrap the peacock curl around a few times. And all I'm just doing here is making a little thorax kind of thing that's a little thicker than the body with the peacock curl. And what that's going to do is that's going to force those hackle fibers to stick out a little bit from the hook shank when I fold them back. Trim the peacock off. I'm going to just very gently pull that hackle back out of the way. And I'm going to put my thread in the front. Hackle pliers. Grab the stem with the hackle pliers. This is where I wet my fingers and I hold that stem up with these fingers and I'm going to stroke the fibers towards the back of the hook. See how they're folding around the stem? Fibers are folding around the stem towards the back of the hook. And then I'm going to do a wrap. And always when I get to the bottom here, I want to again grab that feather and just gently stroke those fibers back. Don't just stroke them on the top. You kind of have to stroke them on the bottom too. Otherwise you get a few of those fibers trapped underneath. Once over the top, hold them at the back, and then up to the top. And about there, about 3 wraps. And I'm going to wrap over top of the stem with my left hand. Pull the stem back and wrap in front, right-handed. Make sure I got some space behind the eye. I'm going to trim that stem out. Again, wet my fingers down a bit and stroke all those little fibers back. I got a couple of mallards there. I'm just going to pull out. And I'm going to build a little bit of a head here, not too tight, but the idea of this little bit of a head is to push those hackle fibers towards the back of the hook a little bit with the thread so that they form a little bit of a tent over the thorax. And then we whip finish.
Dave, what hook is that?
That's a Tiemco 200R. It's like a 3X long, slightly curved hook.
Yeah.
And it's a ring eye. That's what the R stands for. And when you fish this, you're going to fish it with a loop knot, so that you have a tight little loop, so that it flops around on the loop. And that the ring eye means it'll pull straight on that loop, right? The loop of your tippet is going to have a little loop in it through the eye, and that allows the fly to move around quite a bit. Keeps the action up. And then just a teeny bit of head cement, just to be sure. Now, if I hadn't pulled all the fibers off the side of it, I would have used the little bit of stem from the hackle to clean the eye out of the hook. But I kind of buggered that up, so I'll get it with my bodkin. Just make sure it's clear. And that's him. Now you can see that when you stroke this back, that peacock curl makes the fibers spring back out again. And that's the action that you want when you're stripping this thing through the water, is you want it to squidge down and then spring out, and squidge down and spring out.
Dave, I have a question. You know how with partridge, for example, if you want the fibers to stand up, you can reverse the way you do this. So you basically you leave your thread behind and you wrap from the eye of the hook towards the back.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you go with the thread through the just wrapped feather, and that makes the fibers stand up quite nicely. Have you ever tried that with the pheasant rump, or are those fibers way too long to do that?
They're too long to start with, and so they're going to get trained back anyway. And again, that's the reason for the peacock curl in behind the hackle, is that it keeps them from getting plastered right down on the body of the fly. It keeps them spread out a little bit. I think it makes the fly breathe a little better. And of course, if you're casting this thing and retrieving it, that peacock curl is going to pick up a little air and take it with it and give it a little bit of shiny characteristic. But this works for damselfly, dragonflies, small bait fish, leeches. It's a general all-purpose pattern. It's been very, very effective for me, and in multiple colors. Now, there is one body material that you had mentioned, and that's, if you can find it, and I didn't put it as part of the pattern recipe because it's not easy to find, and that's this. That's bear hair. And so what you do instead of the black yarn is you use strands of bear hair. You tie them in by the tip and then wrap them forward, twisting them as you go. It makes a little more lumpy body, but it becomes almost indestructible. This stuff is tough hair. And that was Reg Denny's pattern. He tied the Carey special with bear hair. And I think,
And the other thing is the variation in the color. Even the natural rump,
yeah,
there is variation in the color, so you can also play off that a little bit.
and this one in the light, it's hard to see, but this one uses a purple, a light dyed purple pheasant rump, and that's over top of this one was actually tied with the bear hair, and that's tied over top of the bear hair. So you get this black and purple with a little ribbing. So you can use the natural, or you can use one of these purple, dyed purple. I've got some really bright purple ones, but this light purple one seems to be a little more subdued. I like that better. And that's it.
Looks really good, Dave.
Oh.
Thank you.
Again, like I say, I fished this on a Type 3 sink line, about a 6 foot leader with a non-slip loop knot through the eye, and just let lots of fly line out and zigzag back and forth with it, and it's pretty effective. Just like fishing a dock spratley, it's the same way. So, any questions?
We already asked them.
Great fly.
Yep. Actually, you get going on them, they're pretty quick and easy to tie too. Once you get
What size do you normally tie, Dave?
10s and 12s. I don't think I'd go smaller than 12s. And bigger than 10s, I think you're into other kinds of streamers. Might do it on an 8 for some of the big dragonflies that we get in Alberta. Like the Comphus, big dragonfly nymphs sometimes.
That's great. Thank you, Dave.
Right?
If we're done with the tying, I'd just like to add that Mohammed and I agreed to meet after this fly tying session to answer some questions he has about Klaksui. If anybody's interested in joining us, or with any questions, I'll be glad to answer anything you have. But I also want to tie some flies for Klaksui at some time. And one of the flies I wanted to tie would be this, I call the Hands Special. And it's a laser wrap. And we can make some arrangements for a date to tie that particular fly sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tie it next week or something? Or
If anyone has a suggestion for what we can do next week, let me know.
Oh, there we have it.
What?
The
I
laser
can
wrap.
Yeah, okay. I can tie a couple of Klaksui flies if anybody's interested.
Sure.
In that.
that'd be
Sounds
great.
good to me.
Sounds good.
I've signed up for
And
Klaksui.
what is the body on that fly?
This one is laser wrap. It comes in sheets,
Okay,
and you cut off 1/8 of an inch strips and wrap it. I don't know if you're familiar with laser wrap, but you get a sheet and you turn it sideways. Any light that comes into it is reflected
Yep.
to the edge.
It's
Dave
also sold under the trade name Edge Bright.
Yes. And Dave demonstrated some tying last year about laser wrap. And what I didn't realize and what I learned at that time was that I've been tying it too tight, not allowing enough light to escape from the edges.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I already had about 40 of them tied. And I wasn't about to untie them. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's one of the hints I'll be talking about next week, maybe.
So destination flies, that would be good.
Yeah, great.
Sounds great.
Okay. Are we done there, Dave, with your?
Yeah, I think I'm done. I'm going to hang it up and
Well,
We
last
can end the
night,
recording there, John.
oh, I have a question about Klexowit. Dale, are you still there? Can you hear me? Dale, you're on mute. The question I have is, have you booked into Klexowit yet?
There.
Beg your pardon?
Pardon?
Dale? have you
I'm
booked-
not sure. I was on mute.
Oh, okay. Dale, have you booked into Klexowit yet? Have you got a reservation?
But yes,
Can you tell me, I'm just trying to keep this sheet up to date as to what days you're going, what site? You can email me later if you want.
okay. Yeah, I haven't checked anything.
Okay, good. Well,
Dennis, can I ask you a question
sure.
first? I sent an email off to Kloksui, and the cabins they have left are the higher number cabins. Just, I can't seem to find it at the moment, but
Leap 6.
they're above, I think it was like 8 to 12 or something. Are those the ones that are along the water there?
I got an answer for you here. The ones that are along the water are 1 to 12. And there's also some cabins further inland across the road. 8, 9, and 10. They're smaller ones.
8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so really you don't want 8, 9, and 10 if you don't have to.
No, and we already have people that are staying in cabins 2, 4, and 1, 2, 4, and 8. But some of them are only there for about 3, 4, 5 days.
Yeah,
So what I suggest is that when you make your email to them, you put in your preference of what you would like, your first, second, and third choice, and for the specific days. And they should.
yeah, I have written to them, they get back to me, and then I wanted to find out which cabins were along the water there.
Which ones did they suggest were still available?
Just a minute. Have to find that particular email.
The other thing to do is maybe go a little bit earlier. I didn't do that. I went for August 1. And as Dennis, when I talked to him on the phone, said that's normally the day each year when they reduce the catch limit to.
Well, they can change it from 4 to 2, 3, or I was there one year where you weren't allowed to keep any. There was no retention at all.
Hey, question, Dennis. If I brought smoker up there, if we smoked the salmon, does that count as part of your limit on the way back home? That's a great question.
Yeah. Years ago, people used to do canning up there. And it was difficult to tell how many fish were canned.
Yep.
So I think the regulations, you can check on this, state that the fish must be identified by leaving the head or tail on.
Yeah. But if you process the fish.
But if you process the fish, I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I've never done processing on site or smoked or canning on site.
Yep.
What I've done in the past is when you were allowed 4 a day, I'd keep my limit of 8. And then if I was with someone, my wife or someone, I transport 16 pinks down to the cannery in Nanaimo and have them canned. And I prefer have them canned boneless and skinless and smoked. Now, I haven't done that for a few years because I had a good supply lasting me. But what I've heard recently is that particular cannery is under new management now, and the quality isn't like it used to be. But I heard there is another cannery. The one I'm talking about is St. Jean's. There is another cannery now, I think in Port Hardy or Port McNeil. That'll do it for you too.
Then you got to get it back down. Question.
Well, that sometimes they'll ship it down to Island Outfitters and you can pick it up there.
Okay. So question, I've booked a cabin, as you know. Is there a fridge freezer in the cabin that you can freeze your salmon? Take it home?
There's probably a small freezer in the refrigerator. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is that they do have freezers in the laundry room that are available to the public. And you can put your fish in there, wrap it, put your name on it.
Mhm.
But there has been cases of theft in there,
Yeah.
large cases of theft. So I don't recommend using that. Now I think Dale, do you bring a freezer up, a small freezer?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
It's a
Dale
little
brings a tiny freezer up there and he freezes his own on site.
Mhm. Okay.
When I go up there, I'll have a freezer in my little camper. And because I don't eat fish, I bring home some for the wife. And what I'll do is I'll clean the fish. I'll cut it up into slices of maybe 2 inches slices, leaving the tail on. And I'll put that whole package in one sealed plastic bag. So if I ever do get stopped by the fisheries, they can see it's a pink identifying it by its tail and it's one piece. That's what I do. And I freeze it in my freezer in my camper. And I bring 1 or 2 home that way. Mohammed, did you get a chance to look at the Kluxley website?
Yes, I actually did get on and take a look at it. Yeah, there's actually lots of options. I didn't realize it's actually quite a large resort with all the different options for accommodations. So yeah, I will send an email off and see about booking. What cabin? I have to check with my wife to see whether she wants to come up as well. But what cabin would you recommend if we go that route?
My favorite over the years has always been cabin number 2, which has been taken.
Okay.
But if you go on the website, at one time they had a portion there where they told you about what each cabin had for accommodations, whether it's 1 or 2 bedrooms, a pull-out couch, sofa, or if it was a second story with a small crawl space for another bed, or it.
Yeah.
So if you can look and find out which one suits you, but first of all, I'd find out which ones are available to save you some time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that because I was looking to see if I could find details, and so far I didn't. But I didn't spend much time searching so far. So.
Another thing is that why this originally came up was that I've always wanted to get spots out on the spit, which is the far end, so I didn't have to walk that far to the water. It was just right across the road.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally, they said that the booking dates was January 15th. So I found the secret of getting the one you wanted would be stay up late the night of the 14th, and a couple of seconds after midnight, make your request. That was the secret. Nobody told me this. I just had to find out. And there's a lot of other secrets up there too that I documented and I'll bring to your attention. But this COVID thing, all of a sudden they changed the booking date to mid-November, and nobody knew unless you were checking the website every day, in which case someone did and they notified me. And then I started letting everybody know that was the case. But by the time I got into them, those ones out on the spit were taken already. But I have stayed on the Circle. And what kind of a unit do you have? Do you need a cabin or a camping unit, or?
At this point, I'm looking at a cabin. If my
Okay.
wife doesn't come up, I may take a campsite.
Okay. What kind of a do you have for camp? Do you have a tent or camper or trailer or?
Tent.
A tent, okay. The facilities in the circle, and I've stayed there many times before. Matter of fact, my son got married at Kluxui because he knew I wasn't going to come to a wedding unless it was there. And but we've stayed on the circle many times, and it has full facilities there. The advantage of staying in the circle for camping is that power, water, sewer, but it's also near the washroom and the showers.
Okay.
And the other advantage is it's out of the wind. If you're out on the spit along the water, it can be very windy and gusty. Nothing dries. And again, I'm going to repeat my disclaimers. 1, you don't know what the weather's going to be like.
Absolutely.
2, you don't know if the fish are going to be there. 3, you don't know how many fish you're going to be allowed to keep after August 1st. And the final disclaimer is all of us don't know what this COVID thing are going to be like, or even if the resort's going to be open.
Yeah.
And so I know the booking is restricted to BC only residents. And as far as cabins go, yeah, check on availability. And I know the cabins are quite pricey. Tenting is pretty good. Locations out on the water, 50 to 57. They have power and water, but you have to use the washrooms and toilets just right across the road from there.
Okay. That's good to know.
Any other questions anybody have right now?
No, I think that actually covers it. And you mentioned already about the fishing and that, so that's good. So yeah, it sounds good, and sounds like quite a few people are going at this point. So obviously, pending whatever happens next year.
Yeah.
So Mo, Mohammed, I booked about 4 days ago, and they don't need a credit card. They're not taking cash at this time, so it's just a reservation. And I
Okay,
booked a
excellent.
cabin, but it was kind of restrictive on what was available because I was trying to go for earlier than later. Because come mid-August, I'm going to go fishing on Campbell River more.
Okay.
So I think earlier is better up island for fishing. So maybe even late July or something. I don't know.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
And I'll try to keep this list up to date. And for everybody on the list, I'll send an update of who else is signed up or any changes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And that's it. Hopefully we'll get you into some fishing. If the fishing's there, we'll definitely have a good time if the fish are in.
Yep, sounds good. Oh, that definitely will be
And
good.
I'll go over these secrets that I learned over the last 30 years, and especially the safety cautions that 11 of them I have here that could help also, instead of learning the hard way.
So Dennis and Mo, you guys are getting together for coffee or something like that, or are you getting together on Zoom?
No, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
So all these secrets and stuff, how can I, just for...
Well, what I want to do is I want to make a destination information presentation sort of thing. And I'll set up a date for that. But the priority right now is getting you in there, getting a site.
Yeah.
The next priority is, because it's a slow season for fishing, is get people tying. And so it's something to do between now and fishing season starts again.
Yeah.
So we can get into all these secrets and safety things at any time.
Okay, so you're not getting together for coffee. Okay, no problem. Thanks.
You know, Dennis, what I did with your last set of flies is I took the information you posted and I did a little PDF
Okay.
like this.
Hmm.
So I can try to do that more often with some of the stuff we do that's not like super standard
Yeah.
flies that are kind of, you know, common knowledge.
Florin,
And I promise not to put it anywhere, just circulate it strictly. Well, I'm kind of touchy about this stuff because I don't want to just disseminate stuff without the author's, you know, explicit agreement and so on. So it's just in case you're worried about that, I'm not showing this to anybody.
I don't have any qualms about that whatsoever. I just want to share, and I want to make sure everybody gets the most enjoyment out of every trip or fishing trip or camping trip as possible. And
so that's great.
there
Dennis.
were years where we kept secrets, and I can remember fishing along the beach, and this one guy would be catching fish like crazy. And so he'd go over there and he'd share and he'd show you what fly he's using and maybe even give you one. Well, you take the fly and thank him, and then you go back to your spot and start fishing, but you wouldn't use that fly. You take that fly back to camp and duplicate it because you might lose it.
Oh yeah.
And so my 3 sons and I, we had that agreement. You get any fly that's working, don't use it. Bring it back to camp.
So Dennis, if you're okay making it public, then Florin, can you send me that PDF and I'll put it on our website's forum
Okay.
under Bottle Lake.
That would be great. Thank you.
Because, you know, the amount of information that's in people's heads around here is just phenomenal, right? You know, and you know, so more we can capture is better.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I can also just put it. I can send it to the chat.
Sure. Yeah.
And this way everybody gets it. And
yep.
You know, I mean, what I had, because I did this with a few flies here and there, and when they've asked me for the information for today, I just had a little thing. I recycled some older information and I quickly put a PDF together for the balanced flies. So this is just a little bit more polished.
How do you, in general, how do you guys feel about, say, after our general meeting on Tuesdays, after they close the meeting, me coming on and tying a fly? How would that work, or how do you feel about that? I think we'd have more participants.
Not everybody's interested in fly fishing in
yeah. So
because we're everything from crabs to saltwater.
And not everybody's Tuesday mornings are always available.
Yes. Unfortunately for me, I'm almost never available on weekday mornings.
Okay. So Saturday after our fly tying session, maybe I can do it. Anyway, so next Saturday, it looks like I'm tying a couple of flies for Klexui.
The other option is if you do record it, then I can watch it later. So it's not a big deal if it's done on a Tuesday morning. If it's recorded, that will be fine.
So on next Tuesday morning, in 2 days, we have Richard Best underwater videos by Mike Curry. And then on the 8th, there's no presentation, probably do knots again with Jim Donald. And on the 15th, there's a presentation detecting dementia early. So
Jim's demonstration on that Lefty Craig loop knot.
Yep.
I suggest everybody know that one. That's the only one I use, and I use it right from my fly line right down to my tippet.
Okay, that's your number one knot. Okay.
And one of the hints I do is that when I'm in the river, I'll already have one with fly already tied on, go to the river, fish it. But if I have to replace a tippet, I'll have 2 spools of tippet in one in each pocket, but I'll already have the loops tied onto it. So when I get rid of the old stubby loop and replace it with a new one, I just loop it to loop and I'm ready to go.
Do you guys ever use tippet rings?
Don't know what that is.
I use tippet rings.
Okay, well, it does require you to tie a knot. So what you're saying there is a lot quicker. But if you fish smaller flies, trout and stuff, what I do is I try to buy a short leader, like a 7.5 foot, or I use a new leader until it's been cut to that length. And then these tippet rings are like 2 millimeters or so, 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeter in diameter. They're really tiny. And you can tie them at the end of your leader where it's about a 1x, 2x thickness. And the advantage of it is that you can then tie any thickness within, reason, any tippet thickness to that ring. And you can easily switch from very fine tippet to something a little thicker. So if I'm fishing a streamer and then I want to switch to a size 20 dry fly, I don't have to mess around with anything, and I don't waste any material other than the piece of tippet that I need to replace.
That's what I've done. I've tied tippet rings to every one of my leaders, and I've got it ready to go fairly quickly to just put a connection. And you could even still do a loop connection on a tippet ring, so that's not an issue. And although if you go
You need a
1.5,
bigger, I think you need to buy the bigger rings for that.
yeah, if you go 1.5 to 2, it may be a little tight. But I think I've got 2 millimeter rings, and I know you can get them bigger, and you get the oval ones as well. But yeah, I found them actually to be quite handy.
Yeah, and you can fish dry flies with the small rings. That's it's a piece of metal, but it's not
Yeah.
a problem.
It's so light, it floats. It's not an issue with any weight or anything. So
what's the advantage to tippet rings? Just makes easier loops to connect, or what?
no, the main thing is you're not shortening your leader every time you change a fly. So the tippet ring stays on your leader, and it's only your tippet that you are changing when you need to change it or when you're changing flies.
I fish this way. I fish a leader for 2 years. Something really bad has to happen to that leader for me to have to throw it away. I just keep changing tippet, and it's easier to adjust thickness, because if you keep cutting into the leader, then you sort of tying a knot with very different thicknesses of leader is a bad idea generally, and it's not an easy thing to do well. Whereas with a tippet ring, you can connect something fairly thick to very fine tippet without any trouble.
But you could still put like a lefty Craig knot on the end of your leader and just loop onto that.
That's
right?
what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different idea. Yeah.
Just makes it easier to undo when you don't have a nylon line loop to loop, I guess, connection.
Well, I guess for salt and big flies, I think the loop to loop is probably easier.
Right. Just for the small stuff. Okay.
But for the small stuff, because the loop to loop is a very visible contraption. So if you're at all worried about that spooking fish with too much, knots and nylon and whatever, a tippet ring is a little bit less.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Nice to finally meet you, Mohammed. And I guess I'm done here.
Likewise,
Okay,
thank you.
sounds good. All right.
Okay.
Dale, I'll wait to hear from you via email. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okie doke.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks a lot, everyone.